All right. So
So
we start again. September 5th, 1862. This ascent had been delayed owing to the unfavorable state of the weather. We left the Earth at 1 hour, 3 minutes p.m. The temperature of the air was 59 degrees, and that of the dew point, 50 degrees. The air at first was misty. At the height of 5,000 feet, the temperature was 41 degrees, dew point 37.9 degrees. At 1:13, we entered a dense cloud of about 1,100 feet in thickness, where the temperature fell to 36.5 degrees, the dew point being the same, thus indicating that the air here was saturated with moisture. At this elevation, the report of a gun was heard. Momentarily, the clouds became lighter, and emerging from them at 1:17, a flood of strong sunlight burst upon us with a beautiful blue sky without a cloud, and beneath us lay a magnificent sea of clouds. Its surface varied with endless hills, hillocks, and mountain chains, and with many snow-white tufts rising from it. I here attempted to take a view with the camera, but we were rising with too great rapidity and revolving too quickly to enable me to succeed. The brightness of the clouds, however, was so great that I should have needed but momentary exposure, Dr. Hill Norris having kindly furnished me with extremely sensitive dry plates for the purpose. We reached the height of 2 miles at 1:22, where the sky was of a darker blue and from whence the earth was visible in occasional patches beneath the clouds. The temperature had fallen to the freezing point and the dew point to 26 degrees. The height of 3 miles was attained at 1:28, with a temperature of 18 degrees and the dew point 13 degrees. From 1:22 to 1:30, the wet bulb thermometer read incorrectly, the ice not being properly formed on it. At 1:34, Mr. Coxwell was panting for breath. At 1:38, the mercury of Daniel's hygrometer fell below the limits of the scale. We reached the elevation of 4 miles at 1:40. The temperature was 8 degrees, the dew point minus 15 degrees, or 47 degrees below the freezing point of water. Discharging sand, we in 10 minutes attained the altitude of 5 miles, and the temperature had passed below zero and then read minus 2 degrees. At this point, no dew was observed on Regnot's hygrometer when cooled down to minus 30 degrees. Up to those time, I had taken observations with comfort and experienced no difficulty in breathing, whereas Mr. Coxwell, in consequence of the exertions he had to make, had breathed with difficulty for some time. Having discharged sand, we ascended still higher. The aspirator became troublesome to work, and I found a difficulty in seeing clearly. All right, and so it goes on.
Wow. But wait. What are we doing here? What is this?
What are we doing here? So hi everybody. If you're watching the show live, then you know that you're watching SG2 on Space. This is Shen today. And so we've been doing this show for quite a while. The disembodied voice in the background, we will probably need to have this presence known, right? Sooner or later. This guy.
Hey Shen.
Rather right here.
Hey, what up?
Indeed. Yes. This is great.
How's it going?
Pretty good, actually. I'm not flying. Well, actually, you know what? I did fly today. That's kind of funny, but not in a hot air balloon. I was flying on an airplane.
Well, that's easy.
I went from Houston to Atlanta to visit my family, and so the normal backdrop in the background is not the typical one because this is one of the rooms in their house.
Right.
So you can see a lot of Chinese art. I think. Pretty sure.
You see a lot of my art.
I know. That's pretty great. Like you made all those paintings. So, all right. For some reason, I thought you're gonna wear a steampunk hat. But
this is kind of you're right. This is kind of a steampunky kind of topic, isn't it?
It is. So for the viewers who heard like this portrayal of me trying to be, I don't know. I wasn't actually trying to be anybody. I was reading from this journal entry. It's a book. So it's a book by, I guess what you call them, aeronauts back in the day, right? People who flew these balloons. And so this was called Travels in the Air, and you can actually find it fairly easily online. Like it's printed in the 19th century, so anybody could read it.
Yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate. I couldn't actually find it actually published anywhere, but I grabbed it from a website called Internet Archives.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just searched for that, and you can look at the PDF, and it's it's a PDF, and it's a long one, and we were just commenting that PDFs tend to be kind of clunky when you're reading them, but it's all there, and it looks pretty good. The pages are all yellowed and probably stained with tobacco over there.
Yeah, I mean, I think somebody took a great deal of effort to go through and scan every single page of
they preserved it, so it's preserved forever that way, which I really like. Anyway, this topic.
But like I guess on broader scope, like who are these people, right? Like,
yeah,
why was this even important?
So you were talking about them ascending, and the miles were going by. You said 4 miles, 5 miles is over 26,000 feet, and ordinarily you don't even really, it's really even hard to stay conscious at that altitude. Although it is apparently it is done. These guys. Glaisher and Coxwell. Coxwell was the balloonist. He was what in those days they called them aeronauts. And this was 1862, mid 19th century, and they were on a they were on a scientific expedition in the mid 19th century. Britain in England, this is where this happened. Coal gas had been developed, a technology for heating coal to make gas, and most of the gas was hydrogen, and it was lighter than air, and that's what they used. So by the mid 19th century, the illumination by coal gas was an industrial ambition, and so there was an infrastructure that surrounded the production of this gas, and but a byproduct was that it made balloon flights kind of science, made that kind of science possible. And so in 1862, a balloon filled where this occurred was Wolverhampton Gas Works in England.
This guy is James Glaisher.
Yeah, that's the author of the book, and he's really the kind of the scientist behind this.
Yeah.
The engineer or aeronaut was a gentleman named Henry Coxwell. And they ascended in 1862. They appear to have gone higher than any human up until that time. And really, they ascended to an altitude that's equivalent to where jet planes fly today.
That's pretty remarkable for what is it, the mid 19th century?
Absolutely. And in fact, it so fascinated me that I thought I wanted to, talk about it, do some research on it. Their ascent would become one of the most extreme and dangerous experiments of the Victorian era. Queen Victoria was the queen, the monarch of England
Henry
at that time.
Here, by the way.
That's Coxwell. He was at the time about 40 something. And Glaisher was 50 something.
So this picture is pretty accurate portrayal of what he probably looked like.
That's probably he's probably a little older in that picture.
And they have such wonderful beards, I guess. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. Since the COVID-19 event, beards have come back, and
come back.
Everybody has beards nowadays.
So back to all seriousness. So Henry Coxwell, he and James Glaisher, they both decided to take this epic journey up in the air.
And I want to emphasize, well, it wasn't a single flight. It was part of a program in the early 1860s. These two gentlemen, Glaisher and Coxwell, were making repeated ascents, systematically carrying instruments higher into the atmosphere than anyone had before. At that time, people wanted to know, science wanted to understand more about how the atmosphere was structured. And so they were using these balloons to do that. Each flight extended the range of observations. Each one kind of pushed further upward. And over time, they reached altitudes that by modern understanding should not have been even survivable without oxygen. I think I'm pretty confident that they made 29,000 feet. Okay,
That's the
and
two of them, by the way, in the little contraptions.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, you can see. I'm not sure if that's a photograph. I don't think that. I don't know if that. I don't think that's a photograph. That's probably an engraving produced for them.
Wait.
But
You don't think that's a real picture?
Is
maybe?
it? I think it's a real picture.
It looks like a real picture, but it's like, is this actually them, like up in the air? I mean, I don't know.
It sure looks like some of the renditions that I've seen. You notice the hook there? They have like an anchor that they would throw out when they come down so that they can stop.
Oh yeah, that little anchor right there. Yeah.
Right. So that's all apparently the apparatus. They had a wicker basket. There was a little table in the middle, and then scientific instrumentation, mostly for measuring pressure. And they used the barometric pressure to measure their altitude. But the thing is, it's like at this altitude, your faculties start to become harder to. I mean, your cognitive ability, your physical ability to continue operating is compromised. So, and that's not an opinion. That's physiology. At that altitude, the partial pressure of oxygen is so low that unless you have supplemental oxygen, useful consciousness typically lasts only a few minutes. Your motor control, your ability to control your arms and that kind of thing, your judgment fails, and very quickly you're no longer able to do anything. You really can't do anything about it. I don't know that they completely understood everything there was to know about that. In 1862, two men went up to 29,000 feet without oxygen, and they lived. The balloon itself wasn't a hot air balloon; it was a gas balloon, and it was actually capable of reaching even much higher altitudes. They didn't have any propulsion. They weren't pressurized. No kind of environmental control at all. It rose because it was lighter than the air around it, and it descended only when the lift was reduced. So we're not exactly sure how high they went. The estimates vary. Glaisher himself, he kept measuring until he basically passed out, and then he used the rate of climb at that point to infer that they went up to 37,000 feet. But I don't believe that that's the case. I don't think that's possible. But we're sure of something else.
Is it like? Why do you say that's impossible?
I just don't think that your body will continue to function for more than a few seconds at that altitude. Glaisher kept recording scientific observations as long as he physically could. His handwriting became irregular, and then it was completely illegible, and then it stopped. And he describes in the book. He describes the whole the whole narrative of what happened to him. So he lost he lost the use of his arms, and then at a point the ascent had become something else. It really, at that point where he passed out, Coxwell was also impaired, but probably I surmise that Coxwell was more physically fit. He was younger, probably was much more acclimated or more adapted to doing these ascents. So he said he remained conscious throughout. But at that point, at the point where Glaisher passed out, it wasn't a scientific exercise. It was a survival problem. And the solution, if that's what it was called, the solution to that crisis, if it can be called that, was not a matter of theory. It was like a mechanical thing that had to be done. So Coxwell climbed into the rigging, and he found that his hands were not working, and he had to pull this valve line that had become kind of fouled, and he grabbed it with his teeth. And the balloon began to descend, and then Glaisher regained consciousness, and they both survived. And sometimes, they made a movie about this, it's a delightful movie. They replaced Coxwell.
Yeah, The aeronaut.
The Aeronaut. So people should
No,
look that movie up and watch it. They've replaced Coxwell with a pretty with a girl, with a woman, not a woman, not a girl, and so she's the Aeronaut, and
not to give away the plot or anything, but I guess it is a little different than the than the actual real story, given the fact that I guess they're trying to like combine several characters in one, sort of. I don't know.
I think so. I think they compressed Coxwell into this person, and she's the Aeronaut, right?
That's at least that's one of the promo.
Right. So look up the movie and watch the movie. I thought it was pretty good. This event in 1862 was a scientific ascent. It was conducted at the edge of what the human body could tolerate, at a time when the limits. Yeah, at a time when the limits of that tolerance were not very well understood.
Okay, so they mentioned a bunch of like I don't know how much you know about this, but like, well, let me like they took a bunch of scientific instruments on board. Were those actual like achievements, would you say? Or
yes, I think so. I think mostly they were trying to measure the temperature and the humidity profile.
So prior to this, humans, like we had no idea. Like we didn't know what
well, they knew that if you climb a mountain, the air got thinner and pressure went down. So they certainly knew that. And they had lots of experience, taking balloons up into the atmosphere, but they never went this high before. Coxwell was a professional balloonist, and it was his job to get them up and get them down. Mm-hmm. Glaisher was the scientist. He wasn't, I wouldn't say that he was exactly an adventurer, but he was a trained observer. And if you read his account, you'll agree. I mean,
it's an adventurer.
He had a job with the Royal Observatory at Greenwich, and his work involved precision measurement, temperature, pressure.
Like was some of the reading that I was doing in the beginning that he was just recording.
And they took some pigeons up, which I'll talk about. What they did with pigeons. Yeah. The ascent depended on disciplined observation under conditions that would degrade that discipline. Mm-hmm. So Glaisher was selected to do this work, in effect, for the exact quality that the environment would later take away from him. Meaning, he started to lose his capability as they got up above 20,000 feet. Coxwell was a kind of specialist. He was an experienced aeronaut. He was familiar with the practical mechanics of lift, ballast, and descent. Mm-hmm. And I would say it's not really a theoretical exercise. It's sort of an operational art, flying the balloon. But it was, it was remarkably well developed for the age that we usually think of, the 19th century.
Right. I mean, because you don't think about like back in the mid 19th century that people were having vessels that flew as high as jets.
Yeah, and that's what surprises me. I mean, it's like, oh my God, they went to basically the stratosphere.
Yeah.
And so he knew, Coxwell knew how the balloon behaved. He knew how to manage the ascent and how to bring it down.
I wonder if I can share this picture. Let me see if this works. Nope, never mind. I was trying to put up a picture that was invalid. Never mind. Add little pigeons. Add pigeons. They're pigeons, right? Like so he was carrying pigeons up.
I think 6 pigeons. Glaisher said that they carried 6 pigeons.
Why do they carry these birds up?
The birds were carrier pigeons, and they thought maybe they could communicate. They were testing the ability to communicate using the pigeons. They also wanted to see what would happen to the pigeons. I think nothing good happened to the pigeons. Coxwell.
It would seem like they would have a hard time surviving up there.
Yeah, I'll mention that in a little bit. But as I said, Coxwell was probably the more fit of the two. He had in those days, people generally were more fit than the average person today because, you walked everywhere. And Glaisher talks about walking 7 miles after they had come down. And anyway, but Coxwell was 10 years younger and more accustomed to the altitude. And Glaisher, his job was to monitor these precision equipment. So he was constantly, and in his account you can see I wrote the pressure was so and so, and the temperature was so and so, and so on. And so one observed and one operated. And the ascent really depended on both of them remaining capable. And then when that condition failed, everything else followed. They had no oxygen, no pressurization.
Were they not aware that at some point they could just both pass out? And
I'm not clear on that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what drove them to keep going up like that. But they went to the most extreme altitude that had ever been achieved before. They had a balloon.
Found a picture with some pigeons. This is not them. This is just.
You're fascinated with the pigeons, yeah.
I'm trying to find pigeons.
For a brief period in September of 1862, that was enough to take them to the edge of survival.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the ascent took place on September 5th, 1862. They launched from Wolverhampton Gas Works, just north of the town center, near the junction of Stafford and Cannock Roads. So I went on Google Maps and found
Wolverhampton Gas Works.
There is no such place. There is no such business today. But the location
was, yeah.
I found the location. It's close to the town. I think it's about 20 miles north of the town of the city of Birmingham, which is a big city in
the UK.
Central England.
Yeah.
In England. Yeah. After reaching extreme altitude and descending, they came down several hours later near a place called Ludlow, about 30 miles to the southwest. So they traveled 30 miles in just under 3 hours. The entire event, all of this was done in a single day. The gas used was the coal gas that's produced by heating coal in the absence of air, and it was used generally for lighting throughout the city. That technology had been developed in the early 1800s, late 18th century, early 1900s, and was standard for the day. It's that typical gas light that you see, in depictions of the era where the street lights had gas lamps.
Oh, yeah, that sounds about right. Because back then they used gas a lot for that.
Yeah. Balloons of this type were already in use. In fact, famously in the American Civil War, they served as tethered observation platforms. Some were filled with hydrogen generated in the field. Both sides in the American Civil War used these gas-filled balloons. They used hydrogen that was generated using sulfuric acid and iron filings, because that involves hydrogen.
Let's see. Yeah. Sorry. Keep going.
I was going to say. So that's pretty well known. Gas works, like we're talking about, were a standard part of Victorian infrastructure. The industrial plants like Wolverhampton converted coal into, sometimes it's called town gas, and it's distributed through buried pipes.
This is a picture of the Wolf.
Yeah,
Wolverhampton.
I've seen that picture, and in Glaisher's book, there's a kind of an artistic rendition of a balloon rising up, and you can see that building in the background. By the 1860s, nearly every major English town depended on this kind of gas, and it provided one of the few readily available sources of lifting gas for ballooning. And so one of the questions, what were they really trying to do? They were trying to measure the atmosphere. So,
indeed. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I guess we didn't really have any knowledge of what the atmosphere is like.
In the mid-19th century, meteorology was developing. Observations were made at ground level or from relatively modest elevations above a few thousand feet. The structure of the atmosphere was not well understood, and so that's what this scientific enterprise was attempting to elucidate. So there were like assumptions of very little direct data, and that's what they were collecting. Temperature was expected to decrease with altitude, but the rate of that decrease was not well established at the higher elevations, and humidity was even less certain. I think humidity is also quite significantly a variable. Pressure was readily measurable with a barometric.
Meteorology at that point, you're saying, was still in the incipient. Is that the right word? The beginning phases.
I think that's a good word. Incipient.
Yeah, you like the word I used earlier, verdant. Not that I couldn't use it here, really, but
we'll try to find a place for you to say verdant.
Keep going.
The problem was straightforward in concept. If you want to understand the atmosphere, you have to go into it, and that's what Glaisher set out to do. It was a program, a series of ascents, each one extending the range of observation further upward, and that's what this technology was all about. It was a coal gas within a sealed envelope. It was fabric covered with some kind of sealant, and the coal gas itself, the illuminating gas, provides somewhat less lift than pure hydrogen. So it meant there was a narrower margin for ascent, but it did generate buoyancy, and that's what they used. So as I say, the gas that was used for this ascent was less dense than the surrounding air, so the entire system rose under the forces until the forces were balanced. The control was quite limited, but it wasn't absent. Altitude was adjusted really in two ways. They carried a lot of sand with them, ballast, and so you could, if you wanted to go up, you would release sand, and if you wanted to come back down, you just—
What is this guy doing?
That's the critic. That's an artist's rendition from Glaisher's book, depicting Coxwell heading up into the rigging there to grab a hold of the tether that would open the valve at the top, so that they could descend. And over to the right, you can see Glaisher is basically unconscious.
The guy on top. He looks like he's going to fall out of the balloon.
It looks pretty precarious to me, but I presume he knew what he was doing. He had to do that because the balloon had been rotating gradually. They were constantly rotating, and that valve tether had become both kind of fouled by frost, by frozen, and also frozen water, and also from being tangled. So he had to climb up in there, and then he says that he said that my hands didn't work, because they were frozen, and he grabbed it by his teeth and was able to open the valve, and that's when they started to come down. So they seem to have reached 5 miles plus, probably around 29,000 feet, but only for a few minutes, and so that's what happened. The rate of ascent depended on the amount of lift, how much ballast they were releasing. So they would, they would drop the sand out gradually, and it would allow them to go up. And then the density of the atmosphere got changed as they ascended. As the balloon rose, the surrounding air pressure decreased, and the gas inside of the envelope of the balloon expanded, and that all had to be managed. If the envelope,
a lot to try to figure out while you're also, trying to survive, I guess.
But they had developed this. This was a well-developed art that had been developed. So, you mentioned pigeons. So 6 pigeons were carried in the basket, and I think you can. I don't know if you can see the basket in the picture there. There's like a cage.
Yeah.
Is there a cage over to the left, beneath Coxwell? I think you can see where the pigeons were kept, they were carried in that, and that was they experienced that environment. So basically, living bodies exposed to the same conditions as the men, and as the ascent continued, they responded to those conditions. They were prepared with heavy clothing and protecting themselves from the temperature, but they didn't have oxygen. In later flights in the 1870s and 1880s, they did discover ways of carrying oxygen with them, but that was not used in this case. So, so the lack of oxygen defined the limits. The measurements can only be taken.
I guess ultimately, with all this, how high did they end up reaching?
I think 29,000 feet.
Okay.
Glaisher, in the book, Glaisher has a nifty graph showing.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
He has a nifty graph where he shows their ascent from Wolverhampton as a function of time, and so he has a solid line, depicting.
You know what page number that's on?
In the.
Let me see.
Yes.
Okay, for anybody looking, my head's twisted sideways. Not because I want to do that, but because I'm trying to read this sideways.
It's around page 50.
Oh my gosh, I found it. It's on page, let me see, 60. Page 60. Let me see if I can, okay. I wonder if I can look this up. But let me see. I don't know. All right, like, so you're talking about basically him, like, taking, well, like, how does he, like, if they both passed out, how does they know, like, that's how high?
Well, Coxwell didn't pass out. I'm saying that Glaisher continued making measurements all the way up until about 29,000 feet, and then he stopped. He stopped taking any measurements higher than that, and then he came back online about 10 minutes later. And then he started, and then they were headed down. So he was out.
Yep. All right. This is
actually, if you like, I can read. I think I can read the account.
I got this. Look at that. Yes. See the wonders of screenshotting.
Yeah, but it's sideways or something.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I was twisting my head sideways. It wasn't. All right. Fine. Keep doing this. You can read a bit about what he said. I'm gonna try to get it up.
Okay. He said, I then looked at the barometer and found its reading to be 9 3/4 inches, still decreasing fast, implying a height exceeding 29,000 feet. Shortly after, I laid my arm upon the table, possessed of its full vigor. But on being desirous of using it, I found it powerless. It must have lost its power momentarily. Trying to move the other arm, I found it powerless too. And then I tried to shake myself and succeeded, but I seemed to have no limbs. In looking at the barometer, my head fell over my shoulder. I struggled and shook my body again, but could not move my arms. And getting my head upright for an instant only, it fell on my right shoulder. Then I fell backward, my back resting against the side of the car and my head on its edge. In this position, my eyes were directed to Mr. Coxwell in the ring, and when I shook my body, I seemed to have full power over the muscles of the back and considerably so over those of the neck, but none over either my arms or legs.
Much better. I got it up. I mean, so around what like I guess this is probably around the maximum altitude, right? That this is all.
Well, no, I don't think it's at the maximum altitude. If you look at that diagram, I don't know that's this ascent, but
okay.
I think that was the August. That was the one a month earlier.
Okay.
But this is how he describes it. So he could see Coxwell, and then I dimly saw Mr. Coxwell and endeavored to speak, but could not. In an instant, intense darkness overcame me, so that the optic nerve lost power suddenly. But I was still conscious, with as active a brain as at the present moment whilst writing this. I thought I had been seized with asphyxia and believed I should experience nothing more. as death would come unless we speedily descended. Other thoughts were entering my mind when I suddenly became unconscious as on going to sleep. I cannot tell anything of the sense of hearing, as no sound reaches the ear to break the perfect stillness and silence of the regions between 6 and 7 miles above the earth. My last observation was made at 1 hour, 54 minutes above 29,000 feet. I suppose 2 or 3 minutes to have elapsed between my eyes becoming insensible to seeing fine divisions, and 1 hour, 54 minutes, and then 2 or 3 minutes more to have passed until I was insensible, which I think therefore took place around 1 hour, 56 minutes or 57 minutes.
Right. I found the correct.
That's it. Yes, that's it. Okay.
Previously,
and
what I was showing was the 1863 flight, the one that came afterwards.
And if you know, they didn't want to do this again.
I mean, like, this one's actually pretty good. I mean, did the guy Glaisher, I guess, did he also illustrate this book? That's some good.
I presume. I don't know. I don't know. I presume he did the graph.
Yeah, I mean, he drew little clouds there too.
Yeah,
that's pretty neat.
He said, while I was powerless, I heard the words temperature and observation, and I knew Mr. Coxwell was in the car speaking and endeavoring to rouse me. Therefore, consciousness and hearing had returned. So anyway, he came back to life, but in this diagram, that diagram goes way up to 37,000 feet. But you'll notice that his measurements, the annotation on the graph, stops at just over 29,000 feet, and then he has a dotted line. He's extrapolating up based upon he says in the narrative that he took the rate of ascent and then just tried to draw a line to try to interpolate to match the boundaries. But I don't believe they got that high. But 29,000 feet, I believe.
That's pretty damn good, I would say.
Yeah.
That's so funny that he wrote there, like, intense blue sky at the very top.
That's right.
What? That's a meteorological term, I guess, back then, if you're going above like 6.5 miles.
Well, this was part of an organized scientific effort that was underwritten by the Royal Society and the British Association for Advancement of Science. Also, I think they had some other sponsors as well.
Question: so for like altitude, you have different instruments which can measure that. But how do they know? Like the horizontal graph is, I guess, where they're going. How do they know where they were?
Well, I don't think that they knew precisely where they were. I'm sure they knew they were headed southwest, more or less, which is where they landed. They landed near that Ludlow Castle, I used Google Maps to approximately measure how far they went. But this is just a time series, really.
Okay, fair enough. Someone has probably made a Google Maps of their journey, so I have not.
I don't know that there is information that would support that, but this was them observing, and basically he's measuring the barometric pressure and inferring altitude from that. So, and then also the temperature.
This is really interesting in that this is a case of scientific experimentation where the observer is actually part of the experiment themselves.
I would say in a very real sense, yes, that's the case. Yeah. That they were experimental.
It's not like just do this in a lab or just take some measurements, but like you're actually experiencing it yourself, and your own experience is part of the experiment. So do we still see that today?
Well, I mean, medical experiments on the ISS use the astronauts all the time.
Okay, so yes,
actually that's been criticized because of the lack of repeatability and the small sample size.
Right.
But that's for another day.
That is, we're gonna talk about another day. So they have these scientific instruments which can measure all these conditions, and then they have the humans observing it. So do the instruments data match the human experience, or are there conflicts?
It looks pretty consistent to me. They there are modern examples of people stowing away in the wheel covers of jet planes, particularly from other countries, trying to smuggle themselves into smuggle themselves out of their own country. And so there's been several examples of people surviving in the wheel wells of jet planes and flying to 20 to 30,000 feet and surviving. And in fact, I can't remember exactly when that occurred, but it was several years ago. I thought so it is possible to go. I used to think, I mean, people who ascend Mount Everest typically need to have, and Mount Everest happens to be 29,000 feet. Those ascents are usually always accompanied with oxygen bottles, where you carry oxygen with you in order really to get to the summit. But it is possible to survive and to continue to stay alive if you've been at that altitude for a brief period. So, anyway, he says you wanted to talk about the pigeons. He says well, no, it's important. It's important because here's what they did with the
prop. I feel like there's random things around here in my parents' house. This is really interesting. But continue. Talk about the pigeons.
I have interesting things in my house too.
Go ahead.
So
6 pigeons.
They took 6 pigeons and at about 3 miles they threw it out, and it extended its wings and dropped like a piece of paper.
So these pigeons, I mean, I don't think, I guess, well, there's not really anything else the pigeon could do except try to fly. I mean, they were unwilling participants in this experiment.
So they threw one out at 3 miles, and then they threw one out at 4 miles, and it tried to fly vigorously around and around, and it would take a dip each time, and then a third was thrown out between 4 and 5 miles, which is about as high as they went, and it fell downward like a stone. I think it was dead, but a fourth or frozen. So a fourth was thrown out at 4 miles while they were descending, and it flew in a circle and then alighted on top of the balloon. That's what he said. The 2 remaining pigeons. What?
I said that one's smart to get on top of the balloon.
Well, the 2 I think they didn't have the heart to throw the other 2 pigeons out, or they were too shaken up by the experience they had. So once they got down to the ground, one of them was dead, and the other one was a carrier pigeon. And here's what he said about that: it would not leave the hand when I attempted to throw it off. Till after a quarter of an hour, it began to peck at pieces of ribbon with which its neck was encircled. It was then jerked off the finger and shortly thereafter flew with some vigor toward Wolverhampton. And then what he says is one of the pigeons returned to Wolverhampton the next day, which was Sunday. And that was the only one that ever returned. So it's probably the pigeon the surviving pigeon that was on the ground at Ludlow, or near Ludlow, is the one that survived and made it back home. That's kind of the end of the story about this event.
I mean, this, like, what's the implications of this with these experiments that happened?
Well, this was part of them being able to show to collect raw data about the structure of the atmosphere as altitude increased. I think others had determined, about the logarithmic decrease in pressure. The temperature change with altitude is pretty well understood, even in the 19th century, having to do with adiabatic lapse of the temperature with altitude. In other words, the thing that causes the atmosphere to be in equilibrium is that the atmosphere is laying on the Earth, and that the pressure decreases as a function of altitude, and the structure of that with respect to temperature and pressure is well understood, and predicated or inspired by these kind of measurements. Is a sort of groundbreaking information that was collected 160 years ago. So from these readings, the altitude, from the pressure, the altitude could be inferred. They really were operating probably at the limits of the ability of these instruments to really work, or for which they were calibrated. So, I
just threw a random graph up here, I guess, as I said, like the relationship between temperature and pressure.
So
altitude.
People who know about thermodynamics, like maybe a physicist, can explain this in terms of heat capacity of the air and the work done by a parcel of air as it's raised up. And so the internal energy of a parcel of air is there's an inverse relationship between temperature and pressure, and this is called adiabatic expansion, and then it's complicated by the moisture content. So
adiabatic expansion, it's basically means there's no heat exchange.
There's no heat exchange with a boundary surrounding a parcel of air.
Okay.
Once you get up into the stratosphere, that starts to break down, because at the point of the stratosphere, the atmosphere is so thin that it starts to become the radiation, the heat will penetrate outward without colliding with anything. So this theory has to do with the atmosphere, the air being thermally thermalized, so that a particle will only travel a short distance before it strikes another particle, and likewise with photons of heat that are emitted. When you get to I'm trying to explain this, and I'm inarticulate. When you get to a certain level, then you start to enter a region where you are not in adiabatic equilibrium, but in radiative equilibrium, so that the energy from the sun coming in or from the sky is directly accessible.
Anyway. That makes sense to me. Like, okay, so like what you were just explaining within the realm of the aeronauts is like this kind of phenomenon, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Like temperature decreases as you go up. It kind of expands. The air does.
Mm-hmm.
So pressure drops.
So 29,000 feet is pretty much the limit. They may have gone a little bit higher.
Yeah.
And so the critical fact about all this is that they entered a regime where unaided human survival becomes unstable. So in modern terms, they really needed supplemental oxygen.
There's a company these days, I don't know if you heard of them, called Worldview.
Yeah.
That's like for space tourism, and they're going way up into the stratosphere.
Using a balloon?
Using a balloon, exactly.
Yeah, but it's pressurized. I think
it has to be pressurized.
Environment.
It is pressurized, yeah. So, yeah, I guess
so.
Yeah, because otherwise you can't do it. So that would make sense.
Yeah.
But,
Glacier came off Glaisher lost consciousness, and he describes that pretty vividly in his book, which I thought was pretty wild. It's likely that it's good that Coxwell remained conscious and had taken control of the balloon, once he was able to actuate that valve, they started to come down.
These two guys, after this particular famous flight, they just kept doing, right? Like you said, they were funded by the.
Well, yeah, we've been reading from the book, but I don't know. He goes through a whole history of balloon flights and the whole program that he was engaged in. Many flights. I don't know, at least a dozen flights that are in the index, and it's so anyway, we can treat this as kind of like a little short book review of Glaisher, and also I was just so fascinated with the idea that that people in the 19th century humans in the 19th century, 160 some years ago, flew to an altitude that was comparable to the altitudes that jetliners fly today. And they went up and they survived and came back down to tell the story. So it's just something that I wanted to talk about because I thought it was very cool.
I find it quite fascinating as well, for sure. I was gonna say, for anybody who actually want to, you could visit Glaisher's home. He apparently has a plaque at his home these days. Have you ever been?
I didn't know that. Have I ever been? No.
No. I mean, like he lived for quite a while, clearly. So for definitely, and so at 20 Dartmouth Hill in London, you can go to his home, and I don't know, it's probably a museum, I would presume, and probably learn more than this show in text. So yeah.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to say about it.
There's okay, sounds good, and there is a lunar crater named after Glaisher, by the way.
Oh, I think I knew that.
Fun fact there. Approved in 1935. It's you can actually probably see it from here, like it's on the near side of the moon. And Apollo 15 really did a good job, I guess, mapping it out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so okay, like
I would say let's make it. Let's wrap it up. That's all I wanted to say.
So someone thank you for actually audience that has been commenting on the show, by the way. So I've been keeping up with that. There's Miles, who apparently asked about what an aeronaut is, but I think we explained what that is.
Aeronaut would be a balloon pilot.
Yeah. And then Nicholas, who just threw a bunch of balloon emojis. So I don't think that's a real question, but thank you for throwing that up. So like this is what Miles said a little while back. This is what Nicholas said. And then I don't know who this tapeworm person is, but question, I don't know who this is. Would it be windy up there in the upper atmosphere, hard to control? I think it was, right? You mostly just let it drift where it needs to go.
I think they pretty much only had control over going up and down, as I've described.
Yeah.
And this balloon is not a hot air balloon. It was a balloon filled with lighter than air gas. Mostly, it was the gas that was used for heat, for illumination.
It was commonly used gas at that particular time in history. So, but okay, this sounds good. I think any other questions, feel free to post it later, and we will address it. Or at least I will address it after this episode. So, with that, Leonard, do you have any parting words of wisdom? Or not?
No.
You don't need to. You've dispelled enough.
No.
Wisdom. All right. So I will say thank you to all our present and past donors. And for anybody who wants to support the show, you can always go to patreon.com/SGT otherwise, even better support would be if you actually subscribe to this channel, like it, and share it with people that you like or don't like. It doesn't matter.
Like, share, subscribe,
all of that.
I think there's like a little bell you can press or something, but I'm not an expert.
Oh, what is a bell? Oh, wait, hold up.
On YouTube, there's like a little bell. You can subscribe.
Oh, yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Yep. And I just threw up
like, share. I'm forgetting something else you can do, but
like, subscribe, share. That's what I say. What is this thing? Oh, I just threw. Okay.
Tell your friends.
All of that.
Or not.
Assuming you have friends.
I thought this was so fascinating that I just wanted to share it. I wanted to share this adventure and check out
the fascinating when humans are able to achieve like feats which you don't think they should be able to during that time. I
think so. Yeah. Right.
It's like nowadays, if you say, "Oh, this person reached whatever," you'd be like, "Sure, yeah, any airplane, will get there." But this is back then when they didn't even have.
This was back then.
Yeah,
they didn't even have electricity.
They didn't even have electricity. Let's go with that. No electricity, no airplanes, and somehow they were able to reach the altitude where like jets are flying today. So
yeah,
just like two guys in a balloon. That's pretty remarkable. So, all right. Okay, everybody, we will be back next time. Who knows what we will talk about, but I'm sure it'll be something really interesting.
And I hope you found this interesting. So, and that's all. Good night.
Good night to everyone.
Shalom.